How's it hanging? Nice to meet you. I'm Nick, a solo game dev from Switzerland working on a Metroidvania game called Aestik. If you watched my first devlog, you probably know what kind of game Aestik is. If you didn't, feel free to do so. In this second entry of the devlog series, I will go more into detail about the progression systems of the game. But first, it's time for the sponsor of this video. To keep things organized, I divided the topic into 5 sections. These are story progression, character progression, world progression, the spirit heart / hub, and the collection. While I will talk about those topics separately, they are still connected to each other, which makes sense since in the end, to create a fun experience, everything has to work together. You know, just like the little Einsteins when they pat to blast off. Story progression. By story progression I mean the kind of things players have to do to make progress in the main quest of the game. This kind of progress happens naturally by playing the game and talking to the characters. The main reason players want to make progress in the story is learning about the characters, their individual stories and the game's world in general. Players can also explore parts of the world that are more hidden though. These locations sometimes give more hints about the lore of Aestik. It's like Obama once said, explore to get the lore. Character progression. Okay, I get it. All of us have some kind of power fantasy. We all secretly wish that we were an anime protagonist, don't we? Getting stronger and better is a big part of many game genres, and the Metroidvania is no different. Unlocking abilities to open new paths players couldn't explore before is pretty much a must-have for good Metroidvania games. In Aestik there is currently one skill of that kind. The so-called mist dance functions as a double jump, but because it would be pretty boring to just unlock a second jump, I gave it different properties. The movement speed is increased while active, the height is predetermined so you should use it carefully, and it has a custom animation, sound effect and some tasty particle effects. The player needs to use the mist dance to reach areas they couldn't before, in true Metroidvania manner. But there are also other ways to get stronger in Aestik. You can, for instance, buy the dirt gun at a certain point in the game, as well as unlock a counter move. While these skills are not required for progression and thus are completely optional, they do make the gameplay more interesting as well as giving players more reasons to play further. They also bring you one step closer to being that anime lord we all aim to be, right? World progression. This is a short one. Let's break this down. Players do things, the world changes. To be more clear, players take actions in the game. It might just be opening a gate by hitting a lever, but you can also sometimes influence how stories will progress by taking either one or the other action. In other cases, the world just changes by progressing through the game. NPCs move, other paths open up, environmental changes tied to the stories, etc. The Spirit Heart, aka the hub world, aka the real OG place to be. Hub worlds are great. They're the perfect place to hang out and cool down between diving into the action, but they can be much more. The Spirit Heart also serves as a place where you can learn more about the origins of the player character and some extra lore. It represents the inner world of the protagonist and thus gives him a personal space in an otherwise alien world. In that regard, it's an extension of the story component of the game.
But wait! There's more!
By progressing through the game, players will gain access to more rooms in the Spirit Heart, where they can unlock upgrades, skills, as well as buy ammunition for the dirt gun. That way, there's always a reason to return and look for new things. Another big plus for the Spirit Heart is that it's a place where players can visually see their progress. People love to see their achievements with their own eyes. I guess that's actually one of the reasons why I started making games in the first place. While I'm working on this video, I'm actually also working on the upgrade room for the Spirit Heart. It's a room full of gates guarding upgrades for the player. As this new NPC tells you, you need to add fragments to your collection to open these gates. This is the most recent addition to the game at the moment, and I believe it's a great way to motivate players to explore the world. Collection. Have you ever stared at your stats in an RPG and just thought to you, damn, these are some sexy ass stats? Well, there are no real stats in Aestik, but there are things that make your numbers go Okay. Collecting items is one thing, but seeing them visually represented in an inventory / collection really makes these dopamines go wild. You can also look at your resources like money and ammunition in a nice and organized way. I really kept it simple, but I think that it's a good fit because the systems in Aestik aren't too complex as well. That's it for now. Things might change in the future, but this is pretty much the way that I'm implementing progression into Aestik. I know that players who don't care too much for stories do exist, and that's perfectly fine. To be completely honest, I'm not too much of a story guy myself, at least for story heavy games. There are exceptions though. I do enjoy uncovering stories through gameplay though. If you take the Dark Souls series for instance, you see that nobody forces you to read item descriptions or try to interpret environmental assets. You can play only for the gameplay, for upgrading your gear, for beating those bosses, for getting that stats, for your own personal definition of progress. So, what kind of progress do you enjoy most in games? Are you thirsting for stories, or do you prefer grinding it out to the max level? Maybe you just want to enjoy the journey without focusing too much on what's going to be? Please tell me in the comments if you like to. And thanks for watching the second entry of my Devlog series. I was pretty surprised about how many people already watched the first video, so that's a good motivation to keep this thing going. Feel free to ask or tell me anything you want, I'm more than happy to read and answer your comments. And don't forget to leave your wife, subscribe to the channel and hit that bell.